it's almost felt kind of eternal to these people. And somewhat recently, there was a super long dry spell, and some cracks formed in the plaster on this statue. And some of the monks that took care of it, they went out and they looked at it with these pen lights. They thought they were going to look in through the cracks and see maybe some of the infrastructure, how it was built. But what they found when they looked through it with these pen lights was that it was actually made out of solid gold underneath that plaster. And what they believe happened is this statue is very old, and at some point it was in danger of being damaged or stolen by raiders, and they wanted to protect it. And so they covered this golden, beautiful statue with plaster and mud to protect it. And then they forgot about the golden Buddha beneath the plaster. And everybody throughout the years believed that this was just a plaster Buddha. Until they noticed the gold underneath, and they started to peel away those layers of plaster to reveal the real beauty underneath. And we tend to do that with ourselves. We have, for whatever reason, covered ourselves in these layers of protective mud and plaster to protect ourselves. And we forget about the golden inner truth of who we are on the inside. So that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. We need to first see that mud, that covering, and acknowledge that it's there. And then we need to love that covering. We need to accept it, and then we can start to remove it. So that's what we're here to learn how to do and to talk about today, is those 3 steps. Seeing it, loving and accepting it, so that we can then remove it. Click for me. So we've all got probably some stories from our childhood, maybe more recently even, where we were being our true authentic selves. Maybe as a kid, you were really excited about something, or you were just really quirky and charismatic and maybe loud and boisterous and joyful, and someone told you, that's wrong. You need to be different. The way that you are acting or behaving, who you really are, is incorrect. You need to change that or hide it. And that's when we start putting on those layers of mud, right? That covering. And especially with transness and queerness, there's a lot of extra layers of mud that we put on, because it's not just parents or teachers, it's society as a whole that is telling us who we are is wrong and that we should cover it up. And so we start layering on that mud in a way to attempt to fit in rather than belong. And a lot of people think those terms are interchangeable, belonging or fitting in, but they're really the opposite of each other. Because when we put on those layers of mud, that's us trying to fit into a situation or into a group that is not necessarily willing to accept us for who we really are. So we are trying to fit into something rather than to find a group that allows us to belong. And that can be a really sticky trap, because once you start putting on those layers of mud to try to fit in, it becomes impossible to belong anywhere, because you're not bringing your whole self into a situation that allows for belonging. And the dominant culture itself is really hard to fit into. It's really hard to belong to. And it's hard work to fit into a place where you don't necessarily belong. And so that's what we find ourselves doing. So the most effective tool that people use to get us to do that is shame. And a lot of people forget about the difference between shame and guilt, right? And so people think, well, if I'm not shaming myself into being a better person, I'm never going to get better. Or I can't love and accept myself for who I am, because then I'm not working on these things that I want to work on. So guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, I am wrong. And so society likes to use shame, say, you are wrong and you need to change. And so it's important for us to stand up and say, I don't have to feel that shame that you're trying to make me feel. You don't get to make me decide how I view myself. And so I'm not going to feel that shame because it doesn't belong to me. If you are uncomfortable with who I am as a person, those are your feelings to work through, not mine. It's not my job to make myself uncomfortable so that you can feel comfortable. So that is kind of the mindset shift that we're wanting to see that's going to help us remove some of these layers of mud that we've put on ourselves. So now we know how to see the mud, we're going to try to notice it without judgment. So first we need to talk about what is judgment. Usually when we hear judgment, we think about being judgmental, and it has kind of a negative connotation. But not all judgments are bad. Sometimes we make positive judgments about things. You know, that's a nice car, that's a beautiful house. Those are still judgments as well. So you want to be aware of how often we are bringing judgments to the things around us, to the people around us, and to ourselves. Because we are super judgmental of ourselves. And that's where a lot of that mud and that covering comes from. And we believe that that's who we really are because we're being so judgmental of ourselves. So first, you cannot heal those parts of yourself if you can't let go of those judgments first and just accept that that's who you are right now, and accept that those layers are put there for a reason. They're put there to protect us. And we cannot hate ourselves into being the version of ourselves that we can love. You're never going to be able to hate yourself into being the kind of person that you want to be. So we're going to just practice noticing some things without judgment. There's a really cool analogy about how we view trees when we approach a forest. We don't go into a forest and say, oh, that tree is too skinny, or that tree is gnarled and misshapen, or that's a great tree, and all these others are terrible by comparison. They're all just trees. So we're really good at just looking at a forest and saying, these trees are being trees, and they're wonderful for being trees. And so we have to try to bring that same thought process to ourselves and to people, because we're all just like the trees. We are all exactly the way that we're supposed to be, and we're glorious exactly how we are. No one is supposed to fit some predetermined ideal of what a human being is. We are all just exactly as we are, and that is beautiful. So we're going to practice noticing some things without judgment. And it's really hard to do it for ourselves because we've been judging ourselves for so long. We're really good at it. So let's try some external things. So even just in the room around us. Practice just noticing some things like this wall color. It's very vague. Some of us might say like, oh, this is boring, it's very plain. Those are judgments. What we might say is, this paint is gray. This carpet is short with a rough texture, and there's brown and gray and beige. Some of us typically might look at fluorescent lights and be like, oh, this is terrible, these are so bright, I can hear them buzzing. I'm very neurodivergent, clearly. But, you know, these are fluorescent lights. These lights are illuminating the room. Those are kind of non-judgments, they're just stating facts. So what we're going to do now is we're going to close our eyes again for just a second. And we are going to notice some things about ourselves without judgments. Some of us might be feeling some really strong emotions right now. Let's just notice those emotions. No judgments, just stating the facts. If you have some insecurities that might try to pop up, just notice them. No judgments. As an example, I am nervous. I am feeling inexperienced. I'm also feeling supported. No judgments, just noticing. And just breathe into that space for a second. And then let's come back into our bodies. Wiggle our fingers and our toes and slowly open our eyes. Especially with trans and queer people, when we find a new way to be, or we finally are brave enough to become who we feel like we truly are, it can be really easy to want to judge who we used to be and to feel some really strong negative emotions around who we used to be. It's important to look at that version of yourself with love and compassion and to see that covering for what it was. It was a protective layer. Those versions of yourself allowed you to move safely in situations where it felt unsafe. That covering gave you a safe place, a boundary between you and the world outside that you were afraid would harm you. Those coverings, that mud, did its job to protect you. It did what it was supposed to do. And we've got to try to look at that covering with compassion and love. And love those old versions of ourselves that protected us. Because it did its job. So it's important to allow some space for that version of yourself to exist in your mind without judgment and without hatred or anger or rejection, and just allow it to be there and sit with that. So now that we have seen the mud and sent the mud a little bit of love, how do we take it off? Because it's time to remember that golden Buddha underneath, that true version of ourselves that doesn't need to be covered anymore. And one thing that helped me a little bit was directing some of that anger towards old versions of myself, towards just the circumstances in general that made me feel like I had to hide who I was, and using that to kind of fuel maybe even a little bit of anger to fuel an active rebellion, because that's really what coming out or accepting yourself, learning to love yourself, that's what that really is an active rebellion. It's, accepting your true self is denying the expectations of others and saying, I'm not going to be that person that you want me to be. I'm going to be who I am. That's an active rebellion. So removing the mud can be kind of painful, right? Because it's been protecting us for so long, and it can be really scary to take that off and to enter into the world without that protective covering. You can feel very raw, and it can be really uncomfortable. So we're going to talk about a few ways to remove the mud. One of the best ways, go ahead. Oh, gotta escape and then click out of it, I believe. And then rain. There we go. This is a little trick I picked up from someone named Tara Brock, and she's a meditation coach. And she talks about when we are in times of distress, listen to the rain. So we want to first recognize what we're feeling in the moment. No judgments, just noticing like, anger. Yes, allowing that feeling to be there. So let's talk about anger. Recognize that I'm feeling anger. Yes, allow it to exist without judgment. And then we want to investigate. Where's this anger coming from? Where do I feel it in my body? What previous traumas might be informing this feeling in this moment? When have I felt this way before? What is really at the heart of this? And once we have investigated that emotion, we need to nurture the part of ourself that is feeling it. So once you've figured out what is informing that emotion, that feeling, asking yourself, what does that part of myself need in this moment? And one of the best ways to nurture, especially if it is a super strong emotion, is just putting your hand, open palm, on your chest. Everybody do that for me real quick. Just put your hand on your chest, open palmed, and just feel that warmth coming from your hand into your heart. And just close your eyes for a second and just breathe into that feeling, that warmth. It's a neurological, biological response for this to produce a calming sensation and a comfort. And you might even take your other hand and wrap it around your arm. This is one of the most effective tools I've found when I am in distress. And this is usually the first step for nurturing. And this is going to be really helpful when we're feeling maybe some judgments about ourselves. So one thing you can do while you are feeling that feeling, full acceptance of who we are. And if you want to, you can open your eyes and take your hand away. I like to leave mine there for a long time. I'll just sit there in my house sometimes like that. So some other ways that we can nurture those parts of ourselves and take these small steps when we are interacting with other people and we do become emotional. It's usually a hair trigger response to apologize. Be like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for being too much. Sorry for getting emotional. Especially when talking with people that we trust to hold space for us in those moments, instead of saying, I'm sorry, say thank you. Say, thank you for holding space for me. Thank you for listening while I worked through that. Thank you for being someone it's safe for me to express these emotions with. And the more we say that to other people, the more we can start to say that to ourselves when we're feeling those negative emotions. Thank you, anxiety, for prompting actions that I needed to take, or thank you, discomfort, for bringing awareness to this situation, to me. Another thing we can do is practicing showing up as our true selves with other people, because it's scary. So pick some safe people that it's okay to just show up as your full, unmasked, uncovered self. And the more that you do that, the more comfortable you're going to get with it, and the more people you're going to feel like you can bring that version of yourself to. Also, practicing gratitude for your true self on a regular basis. Just like we brought some love to the coverings and the layers of mud, bring that awareness and that love to your current self when you do start to think about some judgments that you're having about yourself. Send those parts of yourself some love. Try to think about why that part of you exists. How is it serving you in that moment? How is it protecting you? How is it teaching you something new? And thank it. Even sometimes out loud. Sometimes I will be pacing my house and I'm angry and I'm frustrated and I'm stomping and I have to stop and just be like, thank you, anger. Love to see you here. Appreciate you. Thanks, anxiety. Really appreciate what you're trying to do. I know you're trying to protect me from a scary situation, but I've got it from here. It's okay. But thank you. Thank you. And it's funny how quickly that will dispel that negative emotion. Just thanking it and acknowledging it and being like, yeah, I see you. Thank you. I got it though. And it was like, all right. Noticing the feeling of belonging versus fitting in. As you do practice being your true self with other people, notice when you start to feel that difference between, am I trying to fit in or do I belong here? And noticing the just pure joy that comes from belonging in a space. Showing up as yourself, being accepted, being celebrated. Just notice it and be like, wow, I'm really grateful for this feeling. And the more you do that, the more it's going to help you feel a little bit braver in those situations and a little bit more appreciative for your genuine self in that moment. Also, practicing patience with the mud that's a bit stickier and harder to remove. There's going to be parts of you, parts of that covering that are really painful to remove and really scary because that skin, it's almost like a scab that's not ready to come off yet. You start picking at it and the skin underneath there is really raw and it's going to take a little bit more comfort and care to get those parts off. Don't get angry with that mud for being there, because if it's that stuck on there, it was protecting something really vulnerable. And it's really important to give it time to heal and be gentle in that removal process and gentle with yourself. Through this process, one of the main vehicles is going to be true self-care. So we're going to talk about some of the ways that we can truly nurture ourselves in those moments when we are super vulnerable and a lot of discomfort. There's different kinds of self-care. So sometimes we need passive self-care, where we need to rest and take a nap and cancel those engagements. You know, don't be afraid to give yourself the time and the space that you need to heal in that moment. But there's also active self-care. Sometimes the best form of self-care is making that doctor's appointment you've been putting off, dealing with those dishes that have been in the sink for a week, you know, starting to smell a little bit. There's lots of different ways to nurture ourselves. We just want to make sure we're paying attention to the difference between that depression voice that's like, take a nap, you deserve it, and it's like, I really need to go to the doctor, like I need to go to the gym, like make sure you're paying attention to what you need rather than what your brain is telling you deserve, because that can be kind of sticky, right? When it's like, you deserve it, it's like, I deserve a clean house and a functional living space. So just pay attention to that as well. So here's some different types of self-care. And you can see there's different realms. So we've got physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. So listen to your body and listen to your emotions. That's part of what is really powerful about rain, is when you recognize how you're feeling, you can investigate and ask yourself what you really need in that moment. Because it's really easy to say, like, oh, I need self-care, I'm going to go have a pedicure. It's like, okay, is that really what you need, though? You know, is that going to help you feel restored so that you have the energy to continue the healing process, which can be really exhausting? All right, go ahead and go to the next one. So we're going to do one last exercise here. So one last time, if everybody could close your eyes for me. And again, we're going to take deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Inhale again. Exhale. One more time. Inhale. And exhale. And again, feel the weight of your body in the chair. Feel the points of contact between you and the surfaces below you. Your feet on the floor. Your body resting in the chair. And listen to the sounds around you. And allow them to exist and to pass through your consciousness without resistance. And just bring your awareness into this specific moment in time, this room, this minute, this breath. And focus on the rising and the falling of your chest and your stomach as you breathe. And as you do that, I want you to think of a person that you love. Think of someone that you care about deeply. Someone who you wish every bit of happiness and peace and ease and comfort. And just hold an image of that person in your mind as you feel those things. Send them your wishes for peace and happiness. Send love towards them. And now picture someone who you're maybe a little bit more neutral about. Someone you see regularly, but maybe you don't really know them. Maybe a gas station attendant or someone at work. And send them a bit of love and kindness. Send them your wishes that they have peace and happiness and joy. And now think of someone who's a little bit more challenging for you. Someone who has maybe caused you to have some negative experiences. And just for yourself, try to send them the same feelings. Because maybe if they had peace and love and ease, they would not be affecting the world around them in a negative way. So try to wish them those same feelings. Wish them happiness, and joy, and peace. And now picture yourself. Replace that person with yourself. And go ahead and put your hand on your chest as you do this. And in your mind, say, I wish you happiness. I wish you joy. I wish you ease and a sense of calm. I wish you love and belonging. I love you. And you are doing your best. And you are enough. And you are exactly where you're supposed to be on your journey. And just breathe into that space for a minute. Let's start to come back to our bodies. Feel the weight of your body. Those points of contact between you and the surfaces below you. Your hand on your chest. Notice the sounds in the room around you. Let's wiggle our fingers and our toes and slowly open our eyes. Everybody give me a stretch. Let's just be grateful for this moment, being here together with these amazing people. I'm grateful for yourself, for being who you are. Because I'm grateful that you are who you are and that you're here. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'll be here if anybody has any questions or wants to talk about anything. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your evening and rest of your week. Thank you.